Thank you everybody for joining us today. I think the senator just joined us, so let me stop my share. Jennifer Conway, the Broken Arrow Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, chamber members, for joining us today. This has been very special. We've been working with Derek to get Senator Lankford here, and he emailed me, I guess, was it Friday or Thursday? So I jumped on the chance to have a town hall with Senator Lankford here at 11. It is going to be it'll be 11 to 11:45. We'll have the senator open up and just do a brief opening and say whatever he'd like to say, and then we will take question and answer. It truly is a town hall. So if you, two ways, you can raise your hand. Does everybody know how to raise your hand on your screen, or you can just type a question in the chat box and I'll call on you, or if you don't feel comfortable answering it, I can read it I can read it for you. So we'll just kind of wing it. I know everybody will be polite and courteous and have very thoughtful questions, so to not delay anymore, we have our wonderful Senator James Lankford here, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Glad to be able to join you. Let me just say this is an insane time for everyone in schedule, so I appreciate everyone's quick conversation on this. I'm not going to talk a long time because I want to be able to open this up for questions and to try to deal with as many issues we possibly can. I think people have been tracking through the Paycheck Protection Program. There's $350 billion that we allocated towards small businesses and nonprofits to be able to backstop their payroll for 8 weeks. That has now run through all of that $350 billion. It was 1.6 million total businesses, to be able to give you a point of reference for how many businesses took advantage of that nationwide. We had about $4.6 billion of that came to Oklahoma for Oklahoma businesses and nonprofits that they used. So that was used by quite a few folks, and our community banks especially engaged in that in a very significant way. There's been ongoing dialogue for the last really 10 days on extending that program. It's been more complicated than it should by far. Some of my Democratic colleagues, not to be partisan on it because it's not, but it just is on this. So my Democratic colleagues want to put additional stipulations and requirements on what banks could do it, how banks could do it. It really slows down the process significantly to be able to do that. So we're trying not to limit it. We're basically saying every lending institution can participate in this and want to be able to get the funds out. So basically it doesn't harm you based on what bank you typically use, that some banks have more funds than others. Whatever bank you use and whatever location, they have access to it. Just as a point of reference, 60% of the funds that went out from the first portion of this funds went to banks that were community banks. So by far the overwhelming number of loans that went out in the Paycheck Protection Program were from smaller banks like ours in Oklahoma, and we're very, very engaged. So just to give you a heads up on that, the $1,200 checks that have gone out, about 80 million of those have already been deposited. There are more that are ongoing. Right now, the biggest challenge are the folks that are saying, hey, I've fallen through the cracks. I can't see where I am on this. Either they don't make $12,000 a year, and so they typically don't file on income taxes, or there's some other reason that they're not listed or a dependent is not listed in your system. So the way to be able to fix that is go to irs.gov. They have two web portals there, one to be able to track your deposit in your account. If you've not received your deposit, you can type in your information there and it will show you the status of that deposit in your own account, or another spot that says for non-filers, which really means anyone who's not listed in the IRS system, that you can then register your information there and you'll be able to get that information for deposit to them, and then they'll follow up and then do the deposit in the days ahead. So that's ongoing right now, and then there's a lot we're trying to be able to unwind with that currently. Let me open this up for questions so I can get to questions as quickly as we can and go through any issue that you want to be able to talk through.
Right, thank you. So I'm just going to open it up, and if you want to ask a question, Heather, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, feel free.
I typed mine in, but we are a contractor-based business. And so we have 42 contractors that teach at 3 of our music school locations. And we were denied eligibility for the PPP loan because our payroll for the two owners didn't match up with how much we actually pay out. We pay out a great deal more than what we pay ourselves as the owners, and we've still been paying our contractors through this time because we're doing online lessons. But we've lost a significant amount of students who weren't able to go online, for example. And so we still owe and are still responsible for 3 locations of overhead, rent and utilities, etc. Are they making any changes to PPP eligibility for contract-based businesses?
So far, they have not. This has been one of the struggles with all of us not being there. We're fighting the same fight everyone else is that we're not able to do a lot of the negotiations face to face. We're doing them at distance. What they're finding is changing dollar amounts is easier than changing different standards. I have different areas that I have included to say we've got to be able to fix this. So let me do this. Let me try to I'm going to get Derek in contact with you directly. And I want to make sure that we get all the stats on that. And I'm going to try to get with the Treasury today. The 1099, the contract-based businesses have been the most complicated part of all of this. As you know, the 1099 folks from the Paycheck Protection Program didn't come on board until 48 hours before actually the whole program ran out of money. It is part of the revamp of the program that we hope to be able to get done today or Wednesday to be able to extend the program out, add additional dollars to it, so that contract-based businesses can actually utilize this program. But in your situation, it's not different than a lot of others I've talked to. There's still a significant challenge there. One of the things that I tried to be able to push is the Treasury currently has a regulation that 75% of the money has to be used for payroll rather than for, let's say, utilities or lease cost, because the goal of it was really payroll rather than some of the other things. I brought up specifically yesterday with the Secretary of Treasury, and then in a follow-up messages back to him, this issue that you're raising, that there are a lot of businesses that have very high lease costs, but their payroll costs are lower, but it's not zero. So trying to be able to figure that out. So let me get with you in particular, see if you and I and Derek can get a chance to be able to visit, and then we'll try to be able to work this out and see what we can actually get to Treasury, because ultimately that's going to be a regulatory issue.
Great, and I'll connect the two of you, Derek and Heather, together as well, if that, connect that way. Our next question from Mike Rogers on federal assistance in processing state unemployment.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. So we restarted today after being down for about 3.5 weeks. And in talking with folks on the floor, the number one question that I had was, is there anything we can do to assist in filing for unemployment? I'd say probably a good 60% of people stated that they've been applying and being blocked out or not being able to do that. And I don't know if there's any thought federally of assisting the states, because if you listen to the radio, it seems a lot of the states are having that kind of question. So that would be my question from my employees on the floor.
So let me ask, when you say they've been blocked out, they're just not getting access to the portal, they're not able to get their information in, or they're not getting a return phone call, or they're being denied?
Well, I've had two lots. The two most frequent questions are, one, somehow it says that they were blocked because we mass filed, which we weren't allowed to mass file even though we requested to. So we never did mass file. And the second one was that they're just on the phone for 4 to 5 hours and give up and call back the next morning at 1 in the morning. So can't get through. And then ones that have gotten through have received, they're blocked because of a mass filing. And I know that we have not done a mass filing because when the corporation made a decision to close, it was, we're closing tomorrow. And you had to file by the prior Wednesday, or there's some cutoff that we missed. We're like, would you rather have 80 people individually file and fill out all the information, or would you like us to give you all the information and verify it? They said, well, you can't mass file. So we did not mass file and they're getting blocked because it says we did.
Okay, so let me walk through a couple things because we tried to engage a lot with the Oklahoma Employment Security Commission. You're right, this is a state issue. The state has to manage it. But let me give you just a quick 30,000 foot view on this. A typical week for unemployment in Oklahoma is about 1,400 people for the entire state. They've had now several weeks in a row, they've had 45,000 people a week actual file. So it's overwhelmed them. Nationwide, about 2.5 million people filing unemployment would be a really big number. We had last month, 22 million people file for unemployment. So every single state has been overwhelmed with their unemployment system. Unemployment is something that runs through the state. It's something that's needed a lot of care for a long time. To give you a visual on this, the unemployment system itself, the actual computer system and the software that runs it for our state was last updated in 1987. It is a COBOL system running on a mainframe computer, which probably half of the people on this call don't even know what that is. So it is way antiquated on it. Trying to be able to update that system has proved to be exceptionally difficult to be able to change under the new law of the CARES Act, which allows new access for contractors, for gig economy workers, for an extension of $600 for benefits. All those things are new things that have to be programmed into the system. They hope to be able to have that up to speed this week. They were testing it on Thursday and Friday, was not successful, and they were trying to be able to get that out. Some of the changes they've been able to update, some of the changes they have not been able to update yet, and they're trying to be able to get those in as quickly as they can. It's our state and every other state has pretty antiquated systems just because they haven't, it's very rare for them to change. And so it just runs in the same system over and over again. They just try to keep that same system stable. That doesn't help you now, other than this week is when they're trying to be able to get caught up on a lot of the previous calls, and we'll see if they actually can. They've actually taken staff from other offices all over state government and moved them all to the unemployment office to be able to help them. So they've moved, they've doubled their staff, basically people answering the phone. Those folks are trying to be able to separate out what do they have to have a unemployment professional be able to answer, and those folks are calling them, or what are simpler questions that they can answer for people, and the people that are just literally getting trained in a day and then jumping into the phones are trying to be able to cover that. So I would say, tell them not to lose heart, though I can't imagine how exceptionally frustrating that is. They are getting caught up little by little in this when they've doubled their staff size and trying to be able to quickly answer it. They've changed a lot of the technology. Robin Robertson, who's the one who's now leading that group, she's done a lot, and she's just been there a month. So imagine that stepping into this role to be able to direct it when you're brand new into it, also leading that and try to get caught up into this. So all those factors, again, don't help those folks that are going through the process, other than they are working very hard to be able to get caught up on that and to be able to handle the sheer volume on it. Now, the mass filing is disappointing, to say the least, because so many of the companies I have talked to did a mass filing and were able to help their employees get into that. For them not to be able to do that does not help your folks, obviously, at all.
And great. And Mike, on that, we will do is connect you. We have we'll connect you on the state level. So if Darla and I will email you, and if anybody else on the call on the state is having specific issues with their employees with unemployment, let us know. We have a couple of ways that we can help you as a chamber, maybe expedite to help you overall for you. So that'd be great.
Thank you.
All right, next I had, who raised their hand is, I just see Kalpesh iPhone. So whoever that is, that you can speak.
Hotels, and fortunately, all 6 of my hotels, we got the PPP loan. But what our frustration is, before we got the PPP loan approved, we had some of our employees file for unemployment. So now they got some benefits from unemployment. And we have this money that we have to pay them within 60 days. So it looks like they'll get double paid. Some of them will, who filed for unemployment, and some of them didn't get their unemployment benefit, so they won't get double paid. And we feel like at the end of 60 days, this trouble is not going to go away, and we'll be probably broke by the time we go through these 60 days. So we don't know how, is there any opportunity that the PPP loan can, the 60-day period can be extended so that we can stretch out these dollars for a little longer period?
So the current structure of the loan as it came to you was based on the next 8 weeks after that. So it began the first day you got it, and then it goes out for the next 8 weeks. So it can be extended because that's the original purpose of it when the loan actually started itself.
Right.
I can say for employees, when you said you've got some that are now on unemployment, it doesn't have to be connected to the same person. If you have other people that you've hired on, you can pay those folks. It has to just be in line with the number that you have. So if you had 20 people and you paid 20 people at the end as well as at the beginning, they're not trying to be able to validate was it the same 20, because you know that you have some people that have left. There will be some give and take in that. We'll try to be able to answer a specific question as we can. Unfortunately, and this has been the big challenge of getting a program out this quickly, unfortunately, the details on the closing of this after 8 weeks has not been outlined yet. Treasury's given very broad definitions for how they will do that, but the specifics they're still putting out. Their first goal was to be able to get the money out the door as quickly as possible. As you can imagine, a typical government setup, they would do the pass the law, then let's say 6 to 8 months later, they'd have all the regulations done. They would then roll it out and have 45 days for implementation. This one, the law was passed. 7 days later, the regulations were finished and they were implementing it within 7 days. And so all those things that would typically be there in place are not, because the goal was to be able to get the dollars out the door as fast as they possibly could, knowing how many businesses are like yours that are right on the razor's edge of surviving this thing. And so the goal was to get the money out the door as fast as possible to help as many people as possible, knowing it'll be messy in the process as well. But if you want to be able to do a quick follow-up on that, we can certainly do that and talk about what we know at this point about being able to cover employees with the Paycheck Protection Program. You shouldn't have to double pay folks that are getting unemployment as well as paycheck protection.
Very good. Thank you.
Great. Next we have Karen Kempf regarding economic impact payments. Seems to not allow you to enter your direct deposit information and payment status is not available. Is there a fix for that coming soon for those who have filed and have paid their taxes and are current but do not have a DD on file?
All right, say it to me one more time at the very beginning. I want to make sure I followed your question.
So it's the question regarding economic impact payments and those who don't have direct deposit on file, or some who may have previous bank institutions that may have closed. It says that, is there a fix for that coming soon for those who have filed but have not been able to get the direct deposit payments?
So yes, if you go to the non-filer section, there should be some information there on that. If not, let us follow up and we'll directly try to be able to chase that down for you. But the non-filer section has the portal that's there that details the information there about, hey, it's not coming to me, or it's not known, and we'll see if we can actually chase that down. But that's the irs.gov site in that portal for non-filers for the economic recovery payments.
Yeah, James, it just keeps coming up when we do that. Anybody that I've talked to, when we do that, it just still says our information's not available. Even though we have filed and paid taxes, we just don't have direct deposit on there because we're paying, we're sending checks in. And every time I've talked to anybody else, they get the same thing, that it just says our information's not available, status is
Okay,
not
I got
available.
it. That's on the other portal of the two that are there to say, hey, just give me the status basically of the direct deposit. Those individuals that don't have direct deposit information, there's two things. You're right. They're going to try to get all the direct deposits out as fast as they can. For those that don't have it on, but they have the information, they know you exist, they're going to mail a check, physically mail a check, or they will then ping and say, here's a way to be able to fill out that information. But they're trying to complete that portal still so that you could do that. Their biggest challenge on that is they're worried about fraud, that somebody's just going to type in somebody's social security number and they'll have basic address or something, and then they'll steal their bank account information. So they're trying to figure out what's the best way to be able to make sure they can validate that's really you. Doing a previous year's return, all of those things, they're trying to be able to make sure that's finalized so you can get that information in. But if they can't get that information in, can't get the software fast enough, they're just going to physically mail a check.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, I'm not sure that helps a lot, but that is the current plan they're running through right now.
Well, that clarifies it.
And just again, note in the chat box, there is Derek Osborne's information. So if the senator says follow up us directly, feel free to email Derek specifically on any specific questions you need him to follow up on. Okay, would we have any other questions? Lisa, you want to jump in?
Hey,
Lisa.
Senator Lisa Smoligo. I have a quick question on the EIDL. There is a specific question regarding lobbyists, and I'm curious if that is federal or state or both.
Well, Lisa, it's a great question. I don't know that I know if it's, I think it's originally intended to be federal, but let us chase that down before I actually give you a legal answer on that. That's one we can definitely get to you.
I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Yep, glad to help.
Dr. Wood, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, Senator Lankford. As much philosophical as anything else, but this crisis, as you know, has had a huge impact on our economy. The massive number of unemployment and the effect on the national debt. How long can we possibly continue these shutdowns?
At least last week. Not to wax philosophical back to you, no one really knows. This is very uncharted territory. The goal right now is to get us open as fast as we can get open, because the longer you deep into deep waters, the more unknowns there really are. So I know there's a lot of pushback from people saying, hey, let's wait till we have no COVID-19 cases out there and there's no risk. You can't do that. We don't know how long we're going to have COVID-19 in existence and around. We've got to figure out how to get on the other side of the infection rate. We should have downtime where we can slow down the infections, but we've had a significant flattening of the curve in Oklahoma. If you look at all the previous models that came out from the earliest in March all the way through into April, we have been below all of those models overwhelmingly as far as flattening the curve. So it's very significant what we have done to be able to slow down the spread of the virus, and that's helpful. But now we've got to be able to target some key things. One is testing, treatments, and then vaccine. And the other one's going to be availability of beds in hospitals and the availability of being able to re-engage if we have a surge. So let me just try to take a couple of those. We're not afraid of the flu every year because we have testing, we have treatments, and we have vaccines for the flu. Though we have thousands of people that die from the flu, we have all those three elements. We have testing available right now for COVID-19, but it's not rapid testing. Rapid testing is quickly coming on board within the next month. We'll have the ability to have a 15-minute test from most Americans to be able to determine I have symptoms. I can get a test in 15 minutes to be able to get an answer back. Second part of testing is an antibody testing. If you get a virus, your body develops those antibodies. This virus is an unequal attacker. For some people, you get the virus and you don't even know that you had the virus. The symptoms are so mild, it's like allergies or a cold, but your body actually fought it off very efficiently. But you do have the antibodies now based on your body fighting that off. Well, in all likelihood, you can return to work and engage because your body already has an immunity to COVID-19. That test is coming on board in the next month. That will help us dramatically be able to re-engage, to be able to know quickly if I'm showing symptoms, or to also be able to tell I've already had it and so I'm most likely immune to this in the future. Those two tests are significant. There are a lot of treatments that are coming on board. That'll help us significantly. A vaccine is in human trials right now. In fact, there's 3 different vaccines in human trials. Those vaccines won't be on board until December or January at the earliest. Just by the time you get through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of the human trials. So we've got a long way to go to be able to get to a vaccine. We can't wait and hold the economy down until December, January, and think there's not going to be massive global damage from this. So we're trying to be able to figure out, okay, what are the precursors here for treatments and testing, availability of bed space in hospitals, which right now almost every hospital is at 50% or more empty as far as space. So we have lots of surge capabilities. At the same time, our numbers and the speed of our numbers are going down, even though the testing is going up. So we're trying to be able to figure out what's the best way to do this. There are several of us that are kicking around the ideas. You heard the president talk about last week a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 approach. Phase 1 being we start re-engaging the economy, do social distancing, still encourage masks, but open up quote unquote non-essential businesses. Non-essential businesses are not non-essential to the people that own it, the people that work there. They're essential businesses to them. And so a law office, an architect, a consultant, there are lots of folks that they can maintain social distancing, but still get back to their basic operations and their work. So that'll be the first part of that phase 1. And it's starting to do a little more social interaction. If we're successful, the numbers don't pop back up. We're still increasing the number of tests that are available. Then you can move to phase 2, then you can move to phase 3. The whole time in phase 1 and 2, keeping individuals that are most at risk, your older Americans, people with diabetes, people with heart disease and such, still remain, keep them isolated, and they remain sheltered in place. But other folks can start re-engaging the economy much, much faster. So all those things we're starting to be able to push because we know we can't just keep the economy down. Even what's going on right now with the borrowing, we're talking about $2.2 trillion in this overall package of the Paycheck Protection Program and the economic relief payments that are going out. There's a tremendous amount of money being borrowed to be able to sustain us right now. All that has to be paid back in the days ahead. And so even that part of it, economically, we have to look at long term. You can't borrow so much money now that you can't actually pay it back in the future, and so that you damage your tomorrow taken care of today. So that balance we've got to continue to strike as well. I know it's waxing way philosophical and long term, but yes, sir, we're looking at a lot of that.
Thanks, Senator.
Senator talked about adding money to the PPP program. What is going to be the status of the EIDL program, and also well, answer that first.
So what we proposed a $310 billion addition to the Paycheck Protection Program, a $50 billion addition to the EIDL program as well. So there'd be several. We'd also add additional funds to hospitals to be able to make sure that we're staying on track with that. And so that is all additional funding that we're trying to be able to get the final language negotiated right now.
What about adding 501c6s to the PPP program?
As one of the things I proposed from the very beginning, actually, even before the bill passed, I asked the question why C6 organizations were not included. I've continued to be able to raise that. The same thing with folks that are funded with private equity. You're an entity that's funded with private equity, you're excluded in this if every single organization that's funded by the same private equity group counts up to more than 500 people. Well, that doesn't make sense. You're not managed necessarily by the private equity group. That's where your funding came from. You don't count that with banks. You shouldn't count that with private equity, but it does with the small business lending rules. And so I've also worked to try to get that lifted as well as recently as this weekend in conversations with Stephen Mnuchin.
Brittany Littleton, do you have your question?
Thank you. Thanks for being on the call today too, Senator. So my question is, if you had a hard inquiry blocked from the SBA because your credit was locked, if the EIDL is refunded, do you need to start the process over?
For EIDL or for Paycheck Protection?
EIDL.
Well, that's a particular question. I'm not sure I should answer it on the spot. Let Derek reach out to you, and let's go chase that with the Small Business Administration. EIDL is obviously an existing program that's out there. Paycheck Protection, I would encourage you, if you've not looked at that, that as soon as that reopens, look at that. That has no collateral requirements at all or creditworthy status on it. And so that may be a better option to be able to look at long term. But let's connect with Derek on this, and we'll all connect with Small Business Administration, ask that question point blank. Let's see if we can get that worked out, save you some paperwork.
Okay, and just for some context, there isn't anybody so far in the helplines that is able to answer the question, and it's not a failure to pass the credit. It's having the the Experian credit protection lock on credit files.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Dr. Goodson, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Senator, for joining us today. In regard to required large gatherings such as school coming back into session and colleges and universities, I'm with Tulsa Community College, and just what are you hearing that looks like for the fall? There's a lot of different things flying around, and we know not all students learn the best online, and of course, given how much unemployment has risen through this crisis, we know there's going to be a significant workforce training demand.
Yeah,
Thank
there
you.
will be very significant. So I tell you that the first priority that I have on the phasing 1, 2, and 3 is not about number of people in the building, it's space between people, and it's cleaning recommendations. That's the thing that I felt was lacking at the very beginning. When you push to have no less than 10 people in a gathering, well, if your gathering is 10,000 square feet, that's a very odd rule on that to be able to handle that. So space is as much of an issue as it is for number of people. And so that's going to be the initial pushback that we're going to have. No way to guess this fall, no way to guess it. Other than we're showing great progress in every single area of the country. There's been a lot of people that have said, hey, we've seen increased numbers. Almost every state you've seen increased numbers, including ours. It's because there's dramatically increased testing. It's the assumption those numbers have been there before. We're just testing better and more right now. That helps us identify. So increased numbers don't necessarily mean anything unless it was a static number of tests that are out there, which it hasn't been. So our focus right now is to try to get through this in the next month and to be able to get us through the summer. Most viruses dramatically decline in the summer. We don't know if this virus will dramatically decline in the summer as influenza does, as SARS did, as MERS did. We just don't know because it's new, obviously. But that's the hope, that this will be like other coronaviruses that dramatically decrease in the summer. That'll buy us some time to be able to increase testing, increase treatment options, determine more for the antibody testing, who's already had it, is most likely immune already. All of those things will help us get ahead of this as much as possible. But it's going to take a little bit of time to be able to get through it. I'm still in the assumption that we're going to be back at school in the fall. I don't see any reason why we should not be at that point when we're trying to rephase the opening of the economy over the next couple of months here. So there's no reason we shouldn't be back, but there's no way to really know for certain.
Thank you.
Mary, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Senator, I want to piggyback on something Cal Pesh said earlier. We work with a lot of small businesses, so this has been a challenge. On the Paycheck Protection Program, what they're getting is 2.5 months of wages as part of that. 75% has to be used towards that. So once they receive their check, they have 60 days to use those funds. And like Cal Pesh said, sometimes some of those people were unemployed, collecting unemployment. What's happened, a lot of our clients have brought those people back on. They can't double dip for that time they were off. So they somehow have to spend 10 weeks worth of wages in a 2-week period. Or I'm sorry, in a 8-week period. So either they have to bring more people on to spend those wages or pay bonuses or something like that. Is there a solution? Because it seems like at the end of this, there's going to be another problem if they bring on extra people to use those wages, or if they pay bonuses in that. It doesn't seem like the timeline is aligned up, like the 10 weeks of pay they're getting as opposed to the 60 days they have to pay it back.
So the reason the Paycheck Protection Program does 2.5 times 1 month's payroll is how that's set up. That's the size of your loan. The extra amount is done for utilities and for lease payments. So that's why the 75% has to be used for payroll, leaving the other 25% to be used for utility costs and lease costs. Now, if you own your facility and you're paying a mortgage on it, then you could use that money also for your interest payments. You can't use it for the principal, but could use it for the interest as well. That's what the extra dollars are used for. So you don't have to use it completely for payroll. You can use it for utilities and for the lease of your space also. But again, you go back to the 75% number has to be used for payroll. Now, I've had conversation again with the Secretary of the Treasury this weekend, talking about that 75% amount, because I do think there's some concerns there. You have some industry, especially in manufacturing, where they may have fewer people, but their utilities costs are really, really high. So trying to be able to get to a 75% use for payroll doesn't work for them, because then they can't cover their utility costs as well. So I'm asking for some additional flexibility in that, which the law allows, but that'll be up to the regulators to be able to help determine that completely. But yes, we're trying to address all that. Just know that it doesn't have to all be used for payroll, but the highest percentage is intended to be used for payroll.
Right. Okay, that helps clarify.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, one other thing to clarify on that as well is the Paycheck Protection Program, the way that it's set up, any of the part of the loan that is not forgiven is transitioned into a 1% loan for 2 years. So there are some entities that are taking out the loan and knowing I'm not going to be able to do everything for payroll or for utilities, but I also need some additional cash. And a 1% loan with a 2-year payback is helping them get some basic inventory to be able to be ready to reopen as well. And that wasn't the original design, but there is some flexibility that's given so that that could be done as well.
All right, does anybody else have questions? I've run out of my chat box questions.
I have one. I didn't bother to put it in the chat. If I may just ask it, it's a quick one and relates to the previous question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure you could hear me. Is there any idea when we can expect the guidance on the forgiveness? The more detailed guidance?
2 weeks ago.
I know.
Yeah, that was really, it's been my frustration. We dealt with Treasury all along on this. Treasury's trying to crank out as many as they can to get as many regs done and to get all the guidance and information. What's called the interim final rules. They keep telling me they're going to get it tomorrow, and it has not been tomorrow yet to be able to get down the guidance for how things are going to close down. The main focus they had was the 1099 contract workers and trying to be able to get that out there. They've now done that, but they did it literally at the end when they would run out of money in the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, if we get it renewed, the hope is to be able to get that there. I've also got a letter going back out to Treasury today, encouraging Treasury and the Small Business Administration to keep taking applications even right now, keep getting them in the system. So when the money is renewed, that can be turned around faster. I don't know whether they're going to do that or not, but that seems like a reasonable thing to be able to do so that companies can get a turnaround. But as far as what happens 8 weeks from now and the exact instructions back out to banks, it's not done other than they keep telling me it's tomorrow. So maybe today is tomorrow. We'll find out by the end of the day.
Okay, I understand. And I've been following it too. And some banks, I think probably most banks, are still taking applications and then holding them so they can have them in the queue as soon as the SBA will take them. So, okay.
So I'm actually pushing to have E-Train still open and so that they can fully list out everything to SBA, get it all done, get it all submitted. And so they're not just taking them, the banks aren't just taking them in, they can actually submit them all the way through the system. I have them queued up there.
Okay. And how is that going to be communicated once, if that does work and the SBA will start taking?
I have to win that fight first with SBA to get them to open up that system to be able to take it. And if I can get that, that would be today or tomorrow before we would get that done. If they choose to be able to do that, I think it's a reasonable thing to be able to do. And that would help us that when things actually reopen and it's funding, people in the queue could stay in the queue.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Right. We have time for one last question. If anyone has it, speak now. Senator, are there any parting remarks that you would like to give us?
Keep loving on your neighbor on this one. I can't imagine how brutally hard it is in every single segment. I know for people that I talk to and my neighbors, and for what our team is going through in this process, exceptionally difficult for business owners. The worst case scenario is uncertainty, and we have that in spades at this point. So the challenge that we all have is to try to get to some sort of prediction of when we reopen, and then to be able to find a way to be able to help prepare for that moment. Because that's the big challenge, is we're going to reopen at this date, and that date then we can begin to prepare for, knowing at any moment if the situation on the ground changes, that could also change the dynamic. But we're trying to build in some level of predictability. That's why the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 for reopening has been released, to at least give, here's what it would look like to be able to reopen, so people can begin to think about this in their own businesses. And then it becomes a challenge to try to get to a target to be able to do it. I would tell you there's a lot going on the testing and the treatment sides, trying to be able to get to that point, trying to be able to engage on that. So we'll get to that as quickly as we possibly can.
Well, thank you, and we thank you for your leadership in this. I know you and all our federal level elected officials have been incredible for us as a chamber, passing us on information, and we've passed that on immediately on to our members, and that's been incredibly helpful for everyone. If you want to find out more information with their COVID response resources, they have an incredible website at lankfordsenate.gov/issues. And Derek's email is on there. And if any of you need contact any of our elected officials at any time, please let us know. They have been calling us constantly and reaching out, and very responsive. So I have been impressed, and I know all of us appreciate it. Also, everybody, if you could go, there's roundtables right now where we're trying to get one-on-one feedback for the city of Broken Arrow and what we can do to help navigate what does opening look like, what resources do you need, whether it's financial or from a splash guard to a sign to whatnot. So join our roundtables, let us know. We send those out in an email, and any information we can get for you and get from you is what's helped. To me, I think that is what's been incredible, is the sharing of information and the quick responsiveness of government, which has been just short of a miracle. So thank you so much, Senator Lankford, for your dedication and time.
Thank you.